Hi guys, welcome to the show. My name is Seb Ostrovich, aka the Voice of the People, and this is the Weightlifting House podcast. Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of the Weightlifting House podcast with your host Seb Ostrovich, the Voice of the People, joined of course by the People's Scientist Joshua Gibson, and a very special guest, somebody whose voice has probably been heard almost as much as maybe anyone ever in the weightlifting world. We have the People's commentator, Michaela Breeze, on the podcast. Michaela, thank you so much for coming on. This is a pleasure.
No, pleasure for me. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, you've achieved a huge amount in the sport. I mean, you've had an incredibly long career. You've gone on to become, a highly successful coach. You've commentated, on the BBC for the Olympics and all of these various things. But can you give us, the 2 minute kind of update on your biggest achievements in the sport so far before we kind of get into some of these topics that we want to touch on?
Oh, wow. So yeah, it's been a pretty long career. I've been fortunate to be in the sport for over 2 decades, and trying to highlight that one moment that's probably the pinnacle of my career is pretty tough. I've narrowed it down to a couple. Obviously competing at my first ever Olympic Games in Athens 2004, stepping foot onto an Olympic platform was a pretty special moment. And even now I get goosebumps just remembering it. You've got then the gold medal, snatching 100 kilos to win gold at the Commonwealth Games in 2006. Again, that was pretty special. But most recently, having come out of retirement, taking away a bronze medal from the Commonwealth Games, it may not have been gold, but I think what I achieved at the age of 35, when most people had written me off, when most people doubted me, to break my own British records that I'd set 12 years previously, and set a Commonwealth Games record at the age of 35. That's probably one of the highlights right up there.
And yeah, that's insane. Was that the 2014 Commonwealth? Is that the one?
Yeah, Glasgow 2014. Yeah. I retired after Delhi in 2010 and gave myself not long enough to get strong, but put myself in a reasonable position. About 18 months out from the Games, I made the decision to come out of retirement.
And what weight class was that when you snatched 100 kilos?
63.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah. So, I wanted to initially to talk about your book, really. But before I do, I want to talk about what you just said about, coming back in 2014 and doing what you did. So to provide some context for people listening, Dan, who I work with, who helped me produce the Greatest Weightlifters of All Time book, is helping Michaela, or basically finished now, produce a book that's coming out within the next few weeks. And so I've spoken to him a little bit, Michaela, about some of the stories from in the book. And he mentioned something, and correct me if I'm slightly wrong with it, but essentially you had this very long career, and then you were coaching your athletes and you were maybe tired with the way that they weren't pushing as hard as they ought to. Mm-hmm. And so you almost came back out of retirement to show them how to train. In doing so, accidentally qualified for the Commonwealth Games and basically medaled. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you don't just medal accidentally. I mean, the whole, no. as you just described, I guess the setup was pretty accurate. I'd set up a gym. Sinead and myself had opened our own facility, and I was starting to coach my own group of lifters. I've been coaching for about 10, 12 years or so prior to that. Mm-hmm. But a new setup, new location, new people, and quite simply, I had a lot of, I wouldn't say egos, but I had a lot of people in there who thought they were good, thought they were strong, and they were strong, but they weren't training with the same intensity, with the same focus, with the right mindset and concentration to every single lift. And for somebody who has given their life to the sport, I mean, I trained alone most of my career, just me and the radio. And I spent every lift, I was completely focused on every lift. And it just frustrates me a little as a coach when I see people coming into the gym and they just coast through the session. They just do what's on the program with a little bit of thought to it, maybe focusing on one or two technical things. But when I ask my lifters, give me a percentage of what percent focus you are lifting with, and they come back to me with a number of 70, 80%, it's not good enough. If you want to be good, if you want to excel, then I need 100%. And if there's a lapse in concentration every now and again, you can be forgiven for that. But I just wasn't happy that my lifters were focusing enough or training with the right intensity. So one day I popped my shoes on and just thought, I'll join in. I'll take the easy road and do some jerks. And unfortunately, I trained with one of my lifters. They did a set, I did a set. And as soon as I put the bar down, I said, right, come on then, let's go. And they looked at me as if to say, well, I've just done a set. I said, yeah, so far, get on the bar, let's go. And straight away, you kind of sense a change in atmosphere in the gym. And they kind of looked over and thought, okay. And I said, guys, this is what I mean by one on, one off. If you're training with a partner, your recovery is while your partner's working. As soon as your partner is, on the last rep, you should be chalking up, getting ready. You put the weights on and you go again. And suddenly that training session lasted a fraction of the time that they were lasting. I think I did it because I was so fed up of just hanging around the gym for 3 hours. I wanted to be in and out, So now my lifters kind of understand that focus. And I had a bit of banter and a bit of joking. I think they were a bit surprised that I could still lift. And after, I don't know, a couple of weeks, we went to the Welsh Championships, and I'd been giving it a bit of banter and telling the guys that, come on guys, man up, I can still lift more than you. And they didn't like that. And I turned up to coach to find that I'd been entered to compete. I had to dig out my old lifting kit and had a go. I had no idea. I thought if I could snatch 40, I'd be happy. And I went out there. I think I did something like 80 and 100 or somewhere close to those weights with no training. And at that point, the press were on my case asking if I was coming out of retirement. I'd hit something like 25 kilos more than qualification for Commonwealth Games.
Wow.
And I kind of just brushed it off as a bit of a joke. And I thought, okay, I can still do it, but I'm not fussed. And anyway, one thing led to another, and I made the decision to actually give it another go. And there we are, a few months later at the Glasgow Commonwealth Games.
Honestly, that is one of the coolest stories I think I've ever heard in weightlifting, just to be able to do something like that. And I think it's fascinating as well that you talk about, not just necessarily the focus of focusing on each individual rep, but also just not sitting back and relaxing and taking too long in between reps. And this is, I went to the British Championships last month or 5-6 weeks ago, whenever it was. And that is one of the things that I noticed as a bit of a difference between some of the international lifters and then some of the British guys was just the amount of time that was spent in between sets. Some of these international lifters would do a set, then they'd go over to their coach, the coach would say something, they'd chalk up, walk back to the platform, stand around for 20 seconds, and then do the lift. And it kind of surprised me just how little rest there was, just the density of their training was so compact. It kind of blew my mind to some extent. And I've since been trying to do that as much as you can, just like you were saying, do a set, almost imagine that your training partner does a set and then you're back up again.
Yeah, I think you've got to train for different competition scenarios. And sometimes in competition, you will have, 4, 5, 6 minutes before your next attempt. So you need to be able to deal with that. But at the same time, if you're following yourself and you've only got 2 minutes, or even worse, another lifter is called and then goes up and it's you back on the bar and you only have a minute to recover, you've got to be conditioned to that. So my job as a coach now is to condition my lifters to tolerate a decent loading volume in training, to build their Olympic lifting specific fitness. My lifters don't run. They don't go on bikes. They don't go on rowers. They build their fitness by reducing the recovery time between reps, and they build their fitness by completing large volumes over the course of a session, over the course of a week, and over the course of a program. And that's what you're seeing at the British Champs when you've got some quality international caliber athletes. Those athletes have built that foundation. And I think there's a very different mindset in the UK compared to what there is internationally. And I'm speaking generally. Of course, there are athletes in the UK that train hard. But generally, I don't think a lot of athletes know what training hard really means.
So do you think there's any other kind of any other piece of advice you could give to people listening to maximize their training? Because obviously training is the majority of a weightlifter's career. So besides the shortening of the rest periods, is there anything else you'd like to implement with your athletes to help them stop from shortchanging their progress?
Yeah, I think it's important to make sure you're getting a good volume. So, if you're going into a gym and doing 2, maybe 3 exercises a day, and you're only training 2 or 3 times a week, your progress is going to be limited. That's a fact. If you make sure that you're getting a good, and I say a good volume, it depends on the individual. For example, when I was competing at my best, I was managing between 8 and 12 sessions a week. But when I came out of retirement at the age of 35, I was struggling with 3 sessions a week. So I think it's about training intelligently, listening to your body and learning and knowing when you can push because you're fatigued, you're tired, and when to hold back maybe when you maybe picked up an injury or a niggle. So I think the sport is very much about listening to your body. But for anybody listening to this who is involved in lifting, I cannot stress enough the importance of building a really good, solid technical foundation. Only when that foundation is built should you be loading the weights. And I think too many people try to load the bar way too early without a good foundation. And the smaller the foundation, the smaller the peak.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the things that people who've heard you commentating before on the BBC for the Olympics or whatever it is, for the World Championships, one of those things that they'll notice is you comment on technique all the time. That's one of the things that you are, you're always observing whenever you're watching weightlifting. And I'd love to get into that. But before I do, so you mentioned you do these, 10 to 12 sessions a week. You were completely focused on every single rep. And the sort of thing, and then also the fact that you trained alone with a radio on or something. Yeah. So what I'm kind of really interested in is what gave you such a ridiculous level of motivation to be able to put yourself through that on your own? Because, people go to the gym all the time, they train with friends and it's fun. But I've had long periods of time where I train on my own and it's tough. And Josh has been in the same boat as well. So for you to have done this for presumably several years, twice a day, multiple, exercises each session, completely focused, where does that come from? Were you just born with that, or did that develop, as you realized that you could actually be pretty good?
I had a dream. I was a 9-year-old kid watching TV, watching Adrian Morehouse win an Olympic gold for GB. I wanted to compete in Olympic Games. That was it. I was 9 years of age and I had a dream. At that age, I had no idea what weightlifting was. I had no idea that, when I spoke to my dad, he laughed at me and he said, yeah, go on, jog on around the block before your dinner. And I didn't realize at the time how significant that moment would be in my career, how much it would shape my mindset. And, I was still a kid. I was still doing lots of different sports. But when I then had the opportunity to try lifting, and I progressed through the ranks, I was doing okay as a youth lifter. Was number 1 in the UK by the time I was about 18. But I guess for me, the change came when I changed my coach. When I really started to understand the biomechanics of the sport, when I really started to understand that, hey, I could be competitive if I paid 100% attention to detail. I wasn't prepared to do what a lot of countries out there and a lot of athletes are doing to achieve medals. I wasn't prepared to abuse my body and to break the rules. So I had to find another way to hang on to these guys. And whilst it is very clear that they are so much stronger than me, I know for a fact that the girls I was competing against were front squatting for reps more than I could back squat for a single.
Yeah.
But yet I was still there or thereabouts in terms of weights lifted. And that wasn't because I was strong. I was probably the weakest lifter in the group come a world or a European championships. But what I lacked with strength, I made up for in technique. And that's where I spent a significant amount of time in my late teens developing and understanding. I almost took a big step back in my career to recognize that, to really grasp the concept and the different technical approach, which is the way I now coach. And I guess it's the combination of having that dream, then being given the tools to make that dream a reality. It didn't matter what was going on around me. I was a teacher for 11 years, and I was doing some of the hardest parts of my training in the same time I was teaching. So I was holding down a full-time job and achieving that number of sessions. And it didn't matter when I was tired, when I was fatigued, when my body hurt, which was most of the time, there was never a question as to whether I was going to train or not. It was just a routine. It was a mindset. It was a bloody determined mindset. And that has probably been sparked by people doubting me over my career and people saying that I couldn't do it. And for me, it's an internal drive to stick two fingers up and say, well, watch this space. I can do it.
Yeah, I mean, it so often is that kind of chip on the shoulder that can often act as the biggest motivator. And I know that you've been, you're very vocal about the doping in the sport and the problems with it. And do you think to some extent you competing against lifters who, like you said, were prepared to do things by breaking the rules that you weren't prepared to do, that kind of added to the, I don't know if anger is the right word, but almost just defiance that wouldn't be the thing that beat you, and that was a big motivator that, gosh, I'm going to beat people. I might be able to beat people who do this.
As crazy it might sound, I never focused on anybody else. I never worried about anybody else. Yeah, there were lifters there lifting more than me, often at competitions. There were people there that I thought I could beat. But I never got myself into the mindset of being too absorbed in what they were doing. It was fairly obvious as an athlete, just looking around, who was cheating. When you have rather large shadows, rather broadened chins and very deep voices, and physiques of female lifters that just are not feminine at all. Those physiological changes, and what's most notable is the changes from when those lifters were young as they progressed into senior ranks. There were physical changes that were just not right. So I tried not to worry about that. There was nothing I could do about it. And for me, it was very much focus on myself, control the controllables, do the very best that I could every single session, every single rep in training. And if I did that every single day, then ultimately when I get to competition, if I could give my best on that day, then I could ask no more. And for me, that was a way of taking the pressure off myself. And it's hard sometimes to do that and to not worry about everything else and everyone else that's going on around you. But I just tried to switch off. And I guess now I sit back and I reflect on my career and think, wow, how many medals have I lost because I've been cheated out of them? All I'll say is quite a few, I think.
Yeah. And after that reflection, did you have any big setbacks or things you wish kind of wouldn't have happened that prevented maybe more progress, or did everything seem to go pretty smoothly for the most part, avoiding any like major injuries or anything similar?
No, I've had some major injuries. I've got a broken back. I've got a bilateral pars defect, 3 compressed discs. In 2000, I sustained that injury, and I was unable to walk for the best part of several months. A lot of people wanted to operate on me, and I was still young. I was only just out of the junior ranks, and that was a huge setback. And I spent 18 months out of the sport.
Wow!
I spent 18 months learning how to apply this new technique that I'd learned with correct muscle activation. Previously, I'd lifted with no glute activation, no core control, no functional stability. And that's why I'm such a big advocate now of, or for me, it's very obvious when lifters are not firing their glutes. I know it's a bit of a running joke now. I talk about glutes a lot, but hey, if you're a lifter who only uses quads, then you're an absolute fool because you're missing a massive muscle group. And it makes me chuckle now when I see lifters, even good lifters, world-class lifters. I think, my goodness, how much further could they go if they had that understanding and that awareness? And that's something I would never have achieved if I'd had a nice, smooth, easy career. So I look back now and reflect on the challenging times that I've had, whether it be, rehabbing a broken back, whether it be the 2 knee operations I'd had, whether it be a sublux shoulder, whether it be I popped rec fem off the bone. I've had some pretty bad injuries, but every time I've sustained an injury, I've used it as a blessing in disguise, and I've tried to just accept, okay, this happens, I'm injured. How can I make sure that when I get back to full fitness, I'm a better athlete? And I've used that time when injured to work on my weaknesses And quite simply, every time I've come back from injury, I've been far better. So even looking at the setbacks that I've had, I don't regret them. I wouldn't change them, because I wouldn't be the athlete and the coach that I became as a result of them.
Mm-hmm. I think that, you talking about becoming just very hyper aware of whether people are, I think this is your word, sort of firing their glutes properly. I think that kind of became, we all saw I don't know if we all saw, at least I saw, and I'm sure Josh saw and some other people saw, the video of you with Rebecca Kohar. I think she'd done something like 101, 123, something, there and thereabouts. And you spoke to her about it. And I think, obviously, we look at a lifter like her and we think, okay, she moves brilliantly. She's an incredible talent. And obviously, I know that there's a bit of tongue in cheek when you say this, because, you almost can't stand up with a barbell at all if you're not using your glutes to some extent. But what is it that when you looked at her lifting, what are you actually seeing that you think could be done better? Is it the extension? Is it off the floor? I mean, how should she be moving, to your mind, that might help her lift more weight?
Okay, firstly, I'm in no way trying to step on anybody's toes, and especially our coaches who are listening. I think Rebecca is an absolutely fantastic lifter with a great mindset, with very, very good technique, who has a huge potential to go a long, long way. When I was commentating, it was a couple of years ago now, it was 2014 actually, I was, 2014, 2018, I was commentating, and I remember watching her. She won the European Championships.
Right.
And I can relate to her very well, because she's in a very similar body weight to what I was. She's lifting, just a fraction more than me now. Mm-hmm. And I watched her lifting. And as you mentioned earlier, I'm very critical of lifters. I'm very analytical. I'll see something and I'll say it. If I see something technically, I'll say it. And that's me. That's what I pride myself on as a coach. But to me, when I watched her lifting, there was a lack of spark. As the bar went past from mid-thigh to the full extension before she dropped under, there was a lack of spark. There was a lack of what I call kick, explosive power. And don't get me wrong, extremely proficient, extremely good technically in terms of the movement pattern. I'm very, very strong. And I just thought I didn't say it when I was commentating, but I just thought in my mind, wow, if only she used her glutes. and that was anyway, it was on my mind, and I think it was a couple of days after I had a chat with her, and she's a lovely girl, speaks fluent English, and she was really open, and I did a nice little interview with her, and I said to her, can I do something with you? I said, I just want to do a little test. And she said, yeah, sure. I said, look, can we record it? And if you're happy with it, I'll post it on Insta. If you're not, then I'll delete it. And fair play, she's game for a laugh. And we had a go, and I did this little test that you're referring to. And as suspected, she doesn't engage glutes. It was very much a quad dominant leg drive rather than quad and glutes firing at the same time. And we had a bit of a joke, and we put the phone down after we'd recorded it, and she was happy for me to post it. And then we did the same again this year, and still she's not engaging glutes. And it's I just really want her to excel on the world stage, and I'm sure she will.
Yeah.
But my goodness me, when I started activating glutes, that's when the results started coming. I went from snatching 75k to 101. I went from cleaning 92 to 123, albeit there was a few years between as well. But it was a combination of glute firing, new movement patterns, which enabled me to continue progressing, and, if I may say so, never stop progressing, even when I came out of retirement.
So how exactly did this technical revolution come about? Was it an interaction with a coach? Was it you kind of just studying the sport more? Like, what sources of information did you kind of reference to change your technique in this way?
Yeah, so when I was about 18, 19, I was put in touch with another coach, a guy called Ken Price. It was after a period where I had about 18 months where I'd plateaued. I hadn't improved. I was consistently number one in the UK, but I just wasn't making the progress that I felt I should. And at that point, for me, it was either quit, put some weight on, get bigger and stronger, or make some changes. So I met Ken. The first training session together, Ken said nothing to me. He sat on the side and just watched. And I'll be honest with you, I felt like I was wasting my time. I felt like I traveled to see this guy and he wasn't coaching me. He was just watching. And, I look back now and he was just observing. He wanted to see if things changed in my technique as I went heavier and so on. And at the end of the session, he asked me a question. He said, "What are your goals?" And I said, "Well, I want to go to an Olympics." And he said, "Well, what else?" I said, "Well, Ken, I'm stuck on 75 snatch. I want to snatch 80. I'm stuck on 92 clean and jerk. I want to hit 100. And he shook his head and he said, "No, they're not your goals." I said, "Well, yes, they are." "No, they're not." And he said, "The first lesson I'm going to teach you," and this applies to anybody listening to this as well, is that you really can achieve anything you want, but you've first got to believe that you can. He said, "I need you to have the mindset of no limits." And what he was trying to say was, yes, 80 and 100, you can hit those, but they're only stepping stones to the next weight. We only worked together for about 6 months. And in that time, he broke me. He broke me physically. He ripped me apart technically. And he broke me mentally, but more importantly, then built me back up to believe in myself, to believe in my ability. And he basically said to me, you should be able to progress in every competition you compete in. Next couple of years, if you want to go to the Olympic Games. And I remember one session particularly where we spent about an hour and a half just with the technique plates on the bar, and we were snatch grip going from the floor past the knees, just working on that first phase of the lift. And every time am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Every time I got past my knees, Ken would just say no, and I put the bar down. I go again, past my knees, no, back down. And what he was trying to do was teach me how to learn to drive with the legs, how to relax my arms so that the forces were with the big muscle groups. Anyway, an hour and a half up to just past the knees, and every time he'd say no. Anyway, I eventually got the bar past my knees as he wanted. And I stopped. I looked at him and he said, "Well, snatch the fucking thing then." and I guess that was one of the first sessions I did with Ken, but for me, it was learning and gaining an understanding and appreciation of how to move most efficiently. And it made absolute sense, everything that he taught me. And more importantly, he could back it up. So if I asked him a question, why are we doing this? He could explain it. And if someone can explain it and it makes sense, you're going to do it. And this is, I guess, what makes me the outspoken athlete that I am now, which is if a coach tells me to do something in the latter part of my career, I would ask them why. If it wasn't completely obvious, I'd say why. And if they just said, "Well, because I've said so," well, they can do one. That's not a coach. That's not somebody that really knows the sport. When I'm coaching, I encourage people to ask questions. I really want them to understand. And anything I say, weightlifting-wise, I'll back it up. And if I can't back it up, don't listen to me. So it's a guy called Ken Price that shaped my career and helped me make the changes that were necessary.
I mean, I think that story is just a great metaphor for life almost. It's like until you pull the bar to your knee perfectly, you have no business going under it because, we got to start from the beginning and everything has to move right. And if you're practicing going under from a position that isn't ideal, it's not going to be conclusive to the perfect pull one day. I think that's fantastic. And that kind of leads us on really. So, you were spending all this time working on going from the floor to the knee, which is the part of the pull, or you might correct me there, that you kind of believe almost isn't a pull. And so for everybody listening, Michaela's written this book, and the book is called It's Not a Fecking Pull, which I think is, well, obviously a very funny title. It's contentious, and people are going to, whether or not they believe that it's a pull or a push, they're going to be, they're going to want to kind of check it out just because of that title. And so I'd love to kind of talk about that. Michaela, why is it that you believe that it's not a pull?
Okay, so we just take the start position as an example. You're in the start position, We can have discussions all day about where the shoulders should be in relation to the bar. I coach shoulders directly above the bar, and I justify why in the book. I also explain why I wouldn't be in certain other positions. But start position, shoulders above the bar, back nice and neutral, eyes forward, shoulders set back and down. From that position, I don't think I've come across any lifter or any coach that disagrees that from the floor to around mid-thigh, the arm should stay long. Straight, loose, depending on who's coaching, will give you a slightly different term. So if that's the case, how is it a fecking pull? It's a push. So, you're pushing with the legs. Unless you're talking about the quadriceps pulling on tibia or the glutes pulling on your attachments. It's a leg drive. It's a positive leg drive. You're pushing the floor away. You're keeping the arms long, all the way past the knees, often referred to as the first pull. How's it a fucking pull?
See, I like that you acknowledge that, because so Josh, as being like the sciencey guy, he's always studying and reading all the research that comes out. As soon as I mentioned the name of the book, his first reaction was, well, every contraction's a pull. I was like, yeah, but beyond this, Josh, like, what are we actually talking about? And so it's nice that you say, well, look, the quadriceps are pulling on the tibia, but what's actually physically happening? Like that.
But now let's look at the terminology being used. So if you're coaching a beginner and you use the term first pull, what's that lifter going to do? They're going to pull it. And why do you think we have so many technical errors? I mean, I have people coming to my training camps. I deliver seminars all over the country, in other countries as well. And I see an early arm bend. And that early arm bend, I believe, has a huge part due to the terminology that's being used by coaches. If you call it a pull, it's a bit like saying to a little kiddie who's got a hot cup of tea, go and take that cup of tea into mummy. And they're walking, and the instructions they've been given are, don't spill it.
Yeah.
And a little kiddie's walking along holding this cup of tea and saying, don't spill it, don't spill it, don't. What are they going to do?
Yeah. Every time.
If you say to them, keep it in the cup, off they go, keep it in the cup, keep it in the cup. And it's the same here. It's the terminology that's being used and how we as human beings interpret that language. If we frame things in the positive way, then you're training your mind to think of it in the positive way. So when I'm coaching, my coaching cues would be loose arms, positive leg drive. And as a result, I just cannot see how it's a fecking pull. That's all.
And are you kind of distinguishing? So to your mind, is a pull with the arms, or is a pull mimicking a deadlift? You mentioned that if your arms are staying straight, then how is it a pull? But I suppose you could say, well, it's in the same way that when someone does a deadlift, it's a pull, but their arms are staying straight. Are you kind of referring to the pull being?
I'm agreeing that it's a pull with when muscles contract, they pull on bones. But when you use the terminology of pull, 99.9% of people will interpret that as I've got to pull it, and they think of arms.
Yeah. And so you think the negative consequences of referring to it as a pull is basically this early arm bend?
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
And for me, I refer to it as first phase of the lift.
Yeah.
Yeah, simple as that. It's a push. It's a positive leg drive off the floor. Yes, muscles are pulling on bones, but when the way people interpret the term pulling is an early arm bend.
Right. And I mean, honestly, the thing is with that, to me, it makes sense because, I mean, I still refer to it as the first pull or whatever, but then I find myself whenever I'm coaching, especially with beginners and even with intermediate lifters, I'm always saying, like, guys, just push the floor away. Back angle's not going to change. You're just going to extend at the knee. You're just using your quads to push the floor. And I have to over-explain to them, guys, it's not like a pull. It's kind of like a squat. You're just squatting the first portion up. Once the bar reaches mid-thigh, you can pull.
But you're contradicting the terms you're giving them. So you're saying, yes, it's a positive leg drive, but it's called the first pull. You're confusing your athletes there, in my view, anyway.
No, I can completely see what you're saying. And I guess it's just the way I've always, it's always been referred to me as a pull, but everyone kind of knows, really it's a push. And so I think just because you have your arms down by your sides rather than up at your shoulders like a back squat, I'm just I just naturally call it a pull. But
yeah, it's
like you said, I have to clarify to everyone.
But it's called a pull because it's, as British Weightlifting have said, but that's what we've always called it. I don't give a flying hoot if that's what it's always been called. It's not a fecking pull, which is why, and I think I'm just trying to raise awareness because, as I've said, if you refer to it as a pull, your lifters are going to pull. It's a simple fact. You only have to watch. And I've had so many coaches now who have been through certain qualifications with me or who have attended my training camps where I spend a bit of time explaining this. And they've just changed and tweaked the terminology that they're using. And the number of people that have come back to me and said, oh my God, it actually works. You're not going to get anybody, a beginner will not bend their arms if they're focusing on pushing with the legs. But if you tell them it's a pull, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, and I like that you remarked that it was also a phase, and I like to refer to it as phases as well. So like the first phase of the lift from the floor to the knee or above the knee, and then the second phase or the instant of separation or whatever. I think that doesn't provide an image so much as just this is the segment that we're going to focus on, not so much how we're going to lift the bar. It's just where we're going to lift the bar to.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. So how are you? I mean, obviously you're talking about it, you do your IGTV stuff, you're talking about it on this podcast, in the book, but, with British Weightlifting being they're the guys who basically give you the credentials in this country, for good or for bad. Have you approached them about this and sort of said, look, we need to kind of just change the way that we're teaching this to the new waves of athletes all the time?
Let me make one thing clear. I've got a good relationship with British Weightlifting. I deliver their courses. We have good discussions on the courses about technique, about movement patterns. Let's rewind. I've spent my entire career battling the governing body, so I wouldn't say that. That there's been times when things have been good and there has been support, but there's also been a lot of times where I've had to fight my case, and my credentials are not due to them. My credentials are due to the time and the godforsaken effort I've put in. It's not thanks to anybody. In fact, in many cases throughout my career, it's been in spite of the governing body. Now, things have changed, things have evolved, things have moved forwards, which is refreshing to see. And for the last probably 2 decades, I've been challenging the content of what is being taught through the governing body. I've challenged the shoulder position in relation to the bar. They've coached for forever that the shoulders should be forwards of the bar, but in the same sentence, they're talking about arms long and loose. Well, that's a physical impossibility. You cannot have your shoulders forwards of the bar and loose arms and the bar still be in contact. It cannot physically happen, even when you're engaging that and setting the shoulders back and down. Now, not so long ago, I approached the governing body and said, look, this can't happen. Biomechanically, it is impossible. And the response I got was, this is the way we've always done it. And I felt like I'm banging my head against a bloody brick wall. And I just said, fine, crack on, you do your thing, I'll do my thing, and we'll agree to disagree. So that's kind of the way that kind of correspondence has gone for many, many years. And earlier this year, I went to a CPD day, a standardization day of all those that are delivering the British Weightlifting courses across the country. And it was hugely refreshing to hear that they've now changed their coaching model. Now, as far as I'm concerned, anybody who's passionate about sport or this sport, who believes strongly enough, like I do, about this position being optimal, I've got my coaching philosophy and I ain't changing it for no one, because my heart is in it. I believe it and I know it works. I've done it myself. I know that those changes work. And it's very refreshing to see that the governing body has changed. Right. They are now in line with the same things that I coach. We still disagree on some of the terminology that's being used. So, for example, I've gone through this standardization day and lovely to hear that they're now coaching shoulders above the bar. And at the end of the day, I've asked the question, so what are the arms doing? And the response I got was nothing. And I said, okay, so you're saying the arms are long and loose? Yes. And my question back was, so why are you calling it a pull? And the response, because it's always been called a pull.
Yeah.
And I'm still banging my head against the brick wall. And this is why I've written the book. This is why I want to get it out there, because I'm a strong believer that the terminology that's being used in coaching is causing a lot of the technical problems that we're seeing completely unnecessarily. And another example for you is a push press. Everywhere I go, without exception, and I'm hoping over the next decade this is going to change, but I go into a gym and I say, right guys, show me a push press. And I did this just the other day. I had a group in my gym who performed the push press, and it was a dip, drive, and a push. I said, okay, now do it again. And I didn't do a demo. I didn't do any explanations. All I did was change my terminology. I said, now do a jump press. And they looked at me funny, and I said, do exactly what I've said. You've just done a push press, which is what I asked for. Now do a jump press. And suddenly we've got powerful leg explosions. Yeah. Suddenly that bar's flying overhead. I said, that's your push press. I said, but because it's called a push press, you're thinking you've got to push with the arms. Push with the legs, explode with the legs. And that's how it should be done. But again, the terminology that's being used is creating, is having a negative effect in terms of the way people lift.
The Weightlifting House podcast is brought to you by Weightlifting House Thumb Tape. Wrap your thumbs and lift hard with the Weightlifting House Thumb Tape, now also available on subscription. You get to choose how often you need the thumb tape based on your training frequency, all delivered to your door for free. Also, join our nearly 200 patron-strong Patreon page for additional weekly podcasts, coach and athlete interviews, and the Weightlifting House program, all exclusive to Patreon at patreon.com/weightliftinghouse. And lastly, if you live in Europe and you need some new clothing to lift in, head over to Virus and use code WeightliftingHouse for 10% off your order. Back to the show. You know, I think I might have even seen that video that you put up about that, but I like that sort of thing where, you know, just because it's push and press and those two words, people instantly start thinking this is an upper body thing. They don't realize that this is, you know, the push press is, you know, if you want to up your push press and you can only pick one exercise, probably squatting over strict pressing is the way to go. You know, it really is all going to come from your lower body, especially if you want to see it transfer to the jerk.
Can we just clarify something? Because there's probably people listening at the moment. You know, I've addressed the first phase of the lift from the floor to mid thigh, but a lot of people will be thinking, what about the second pull, as it were, which I refer to as second phase. For me, that second phase, if lifters then, let's say they do get good leg extension, powerful leg extension, and then they shrug and pull, which is commonly what's coached. In my view, what that lifter is doing is delaying their time getting underneath the bar. I focus relaxed arms all the way through. So as soon as you hit full extension, you then start to drop immediately. You're in and out of hip and knee extension straight away. But because of the powerful extension explosion with the legs, the quads and glutes, the bar will generate upward momentum. And it's that upward momentum that I refer to as float. And it's when the bar is floating upward, with the lifter dropping straight away, the bar will only change direction when the lifter's already underneath. The comparison of a lifter who relaxes the arms and lets the bar float versus a lifter who gives a shrug and a pull, the difference is where the lifter is in relation to the bar when the bar changes direction. And a lifter who relaxes the arms will already be underneath the bar. The height the bar achieves in both cases is pretty much the same. Right. But the difference is the amount of time that the lifter has to get underneath.
If we could rewind just slightly at the finish, I'm trying to imagine the image you're trying to convey. So when you say using the glutes, like I think of this like laying back almost and having the hips extend to a great degree. What kind of image are you trying to create at the top of the lift at the
second
finish? Yeah, exactly. at full extension.
And, you know, that's a good question. We've given this a lot of thought. The title of the book is It's Not a Fecking Pull. And for exactly the reason you've asked that question, the image that's going on the front of the book is what I'm going to try and explain. It's a picture of me in a fully extended position. I cannot physically get any higher, any taller, any more extended. But the bar is as low as I can possibly keep it. It's on relaxed long arms. Now, the position you've just described, is what I would term a hyperextension of the lower back.
Right.
So if there's any movement backwards of the shoulders, think about basic biomechanics here. If the shoulders go backwards, where do the hips go?
Forwards.
And where's the bar going to go?
Forwards. Yeah.
So if you want the bar to come up and to stay as close to the body as possible and to not create any swing on the bar, then basic biomechanics, your force needs to go into the floor, head, top of your head towards the roof, towards the ceiling, so you get full extension without an arch in the lower back and a lean back. That's a hyperextension. Right. And that is not as tall, not as high as you can get if you were fully extended. So when we talk about glutes engaging, a powerful glute contraction, it's a powerful glute contraction to get hip extension, not hyperextension of the lower back.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting when you talk about this, the two of you, because I know that from having spent so much time with Josh and then Michaela, for having followed you for, several years now, you both have the same model of what you want a lifter to do at the top portion of the lift. And it's just interesting hearing that you both have this kind of different terminology about it. Or at the very least, Josh maybe misconstrued what you were saying, even though what you physically get athletes to do is very similar to what he wants to get athletes to do. Mm-hmm. And I think there might be yeah, sorry, go on.
I think a lot has changed in the last probably decade or two. I think there's two types of lifters out there these days. There are lifters who shrug and pull, who typically throw the shoulders back at the top of the extension, the finish, whatever position you want to call it. And consequently, the hips go forwards and the bar swings. Typically, those lifters, and I am talking generally here, those lifters generally are less consistent.
Yeah.
They're also more prone to injury compared to the lifters that we typically see these days and are becoming more and more frequent. Lifters who are doing bugger all with their arms. They're extending powerfully with the legs and they're under that bar without giving any thought to trying to pull it. And those lifters are up and down and they're landing in a sweet position and the bar stays very close. There's very little swing and they're generally more consistent. And I think this is down to, and tell me if you disagree, Josh, but potentially the way that things have historically been coached, where many years ago, I'll say many years ago, 20, 30, 40 years ago, lifters used to do the split snatch, the split clean. And in order to kind of form that, it's very much more an upper body movement, but more of a swing, I guess, to get the bar into position. And I think that a lot of old school coaches have now tried to change to teaching a squat lift, but have still taken the old school principles. And that is where I see things being held back in our sport. The sport has changed. The way lifters move now is very different from the way lifters moved just 20 years ago. They're more efficient, they're faster, they're more dynamic. Lifters are having to find ways to get that advantage, like I did. So they're looking for ways to be more efficient. And there's many more countries now that are coaching loose arms and it being more of a focused, positive leg drive rather than a pull. You look at the Chinese, you don't see them doing pulls like a lot of the Europeans would do. What you see them doing is commonly referred to as panda pulls, which I don't think is the correct term. I don't want to be accused of using that term because I think it can be misinterpreted. I believe the correct name is falila. And you see them extending powerfully but dropping straight away.
Straight away, yeah.
And that's not a pull. That's a positive leg drive and drop. What they're focusing on is hitting extension and in and out of extension to start that drop underneath the bar. That's not a pull. That's what I call float. They're generating upward float on the bar to give them time to drop under.
And obviously you're probably the best representation of the technical model you want to convey to other people. But for listeners, are there any athletes who you see who do this exceptionally well and you could point them towards those people so they can watch and really get an idea of what a well done lift should look like?
I wish I could. I'm so bad with names. I've been a teacher for 11 years. And even then, I honestly, I'm so bad with names. That's a good point, and it's a good question. And it's really, I'm struggling to give you a whole load of people. I can give you a whole load of people not to watch.
Oh, please do.
I think no, I'm not going to get in trouble here. I've got a reputation for being outspoken, but you've heard this on the commentary. Now, I guess the best way to understand what a good lift is, when I'm commentating, I'll say it. If I've seen something, and I'll say, okay, watch the slow-mo, watch the shrug and pull, watch the shoulders whip back. Now look where the hips go, and you wonder why they just missed that lift. Yeah, or a lift that's holding their back after a lift. Well, you look at that jerk position. Does that look safe to you? Well, no, that's why they're in pain. So there are some lifters that I'll say that exceptionally talented lifter, but don't copy them technically because. Or I might say, watch this lifter, watch the upward float on the bar. Look where they are when the bar starts to change direction. So commentating, I'll constantly give those kind of pointers so people can see what a good lift should be. But I try to, and don't get me wrong, I'm nowhere near the finished article. I was too tall for my weight category. I was not the right build. But I've tried to use illustrations in this book, and I'm still yet to see the book. I'm still yet to see how it looks with all the pictures in there. So I'm hoping it gives a true representation of the points that I'm trying to put across. But yeah, I've tried to illustrate the book with pictures to show certain things, good and bad.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned just being there and commentating and seeing these amazing lifts, and it suddenly dawned on me that you were there commentating at the time when, love him or hate him, but when Ilya hit that 2:42 at the 2014 World Championships in that incredible 105 class where there were 3 back-to-back world records. Does that stand out as one of the most sort of, just incredible moments as a commentator?
No.
Is that just because of hindsight, though? Or even at the time?
How many times has he been caught?
Twice.
It don't impress me much, put it that way, as Shania Twain would say. I got no time for anybody who's abused. End of. That's it. End of discussion on that. I literally couldn't care less whether it's a world record, whether it's an Olympic title. They don't deserve it. That's my view, and yeah.
At the time, at the time before you knew, the strange thing with this sport, and you probably feel this as something quite difficult, especially being the commentator, is that lifters are getting popped, and so it's easy to then discredit that lifter. But then when we see other lifters who haven't been popped, at least yet, but we all in the weightlifting community are aware of certain weightlifters who are doing things they shouldn't be doing. Is that difficult for you? Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult, and the position I'm in, unless something has been proven, I can't say it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'd have my backside handed to me if I speculated about lifters. Sometimes my lack of commentary maybe says it.
Yeah.
If something is unbelievable, it usually is. You know what I mean? There's certain ways that my frustrations are put across, but I have to be very careful, very diplomatic in the manner in which I approach commentary. And sometimes my personal views I cannot air. However, when a lifter has tested positive, we want to make sure the public know, because when you're in the armchair watching TV, and you kind of get behind people, don't you? Mm-hmm. And I think it's only right that people get behind somebody having made an informed decision. And I don't want to paint a nice, pretty picture of Ilya who's got an incredible track record, but guys, he's a cheat. That is a fact. And he's not cheated once; he's cheated numerous times. And was it exciting to commentate on that competition at that time? Of course it was. It was a tremendous spectacle of weights lifted. And there was immense pressure on him, and he executed. But he's a drugs cheat. Fact.
It's funny because even in that session, the guy who hit the first world record, he then got popped, a few months ago. Then the other guy, the Russian, he hasn't been popped, but all of Russia basically got disqualified for a couple of years. So it tends to be.
From a commentary point of view, I cannot say, and I cannot say my thoughts on those lifters. If they haven't tested positive, it's not a fact. And and I don't want to be caught in speculation.
Yeah, and I mean
that's a nice thing about having a podcast.
Like I know the heart of Seb's question was, what was one of the greatest moments you've witnessed as a commentator? So maybe if you can recount that for us, something that really stands out.
Oh, goodness me, there's been so many. Oh, you're putting me on the spot now. There have been so many moments. I mean, the Cuban guy who won Olympic gold. I mean, forgive me, I forget the name. One of the middle men's categories.
Ali Mendez.
Yeah, that's the guy.
He didn't win the Olympics, but he won the Worlds the year after.
The Worlds,
I think you were commentating then. Yeah.
I mean, that moment was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you got a clean lifter and you know they're a clean lifter, and you see the emotion that lifter brings to the platform, you compare that to somebody who goes out, breaks world records, wins a world or an Olympic title, and doesn't even break a smile, and you know clearly they're beamed out their heads. I mean, having those special moments when you know that lifter is clean, when they've worked their life for that moment, that they are far more special moments for me as a commentator than anything else.
Yeah. I'm trying to think who that was, because I just suddenly dawned on me that Ali Mendez is from Chile, not Cuba.
No, I'm sure.
I can't think who the Cuban
Colombian, Colombia, I think. Sorry, not Cuban.
Oh, Colombian. Okay, there are a few others that it could have been. But yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. When you see that sort of thing happen, you can you relate to it so much more, I guess. You know the sorts of training they're going through, and yeah, must have been just incredible moments to see all of these things.
Oh, and I've been so privileged to witness so many of them.
Mm-hmm. How did that even come about? Oscar Figueroa, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a heart-wrenching...
That was the moment for me.
Just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
he broke down and... 62, yeah. And he put his shoes on the platform, and I think that was his fourth Olympics in a row, and he'd been injured at previous ones, and he finally... Could have even been his fifth, and he finally got the gold. That was one of the greatest moments, I think, in weightlifting history. Yeah. That's amazing.
That's the highlight of my comment. I think actually I was an emotional wreck. I don't think I could commentate after that. I was listening.
Understandably. So how did that even come about? How did you become the commentator, the go-to person for these big major competitions?
Oh, goodness me, I don't even know. I think many years ago, 98, it was the European champs in Riesa, Germany. I was still a junior. I competed, and at the end of the competition, David Goldstrom pulled me to one side and said, do you want to come and join me in the commentary box, and we'll have a chat about your competition? So I did. And then the following year we did the same. And then, I don't know, a couple of years later I was asked, do I want to, we'll have a chat, but instead of it just being a few minutes, let's chat through, I don't know, the first half of the next competition. And then, during that time I was giving my views on what I was seeing. And it just kind of grew from there. I was given more opportunities. I was given a whole category to do. Then I was given the women's categories. And then I think Dave Goldstrom had a fallout with David Morgan, which opened the door. And now I just keep Goldie happy, and he keeps inviting me back. So that's kind of how it started. And then with regards to Commonwealth and Olympic, I was approached by the host broadcasters. And it's those guys that employ me to do the commentary, and those feeds then go worldwide. So that's, I guess, kind of on the reputation that I built, having done European and world champs.
That's amazing. I mean, yeah, I think there are very few things that can be as fun. I mean, probably they're quite pressurized as well, but from having been the athlete to then get to do that, I think must be pretty awesome.
Yeah, and that in itself has opened other doors as well. I'm now doing commentary on other sports as well when it comes to Olympic and Commonwealth Games. So that's kind of a scary, exciting change in my career as well. So it's another door, I guess, that's been opened as a result, which I'm very grateful for.
So how have you been able to handle the feedback? I'm sure you hear from quite a few people, positive or negative, from your commentating and then from your kind of vocalization of your views on technique and training. How do you handle the negative and the positive feedback?
To be fair, I mean, I know there's negative out there, but I don't go looking for it. Why would you do that? Like, all I'm doing is delivering something that I'm passionate about. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of the negativity is in the weightlifting community. And for sure, without doubt, I know there is a lot of bitterness and jealousy. It's a small sport. But, for many years, I was the only funded athlete in Great Britain. For many years, I was the only one getting any support. And you think other lifters are not going to get jealous? But the difference was I was producing results. I wasn't going on trips to have a drink and to party, and I was going on trips to perform, to get back to work. For me, I was a very, very focused athlete. I was almost professional before the sport was. And as a result, people get jealous, people get bitter, and to be honest, I really don't care. I see how people lift. I know I can make a difference to them, but I'm not going to interfere. All I'm going to do is put my views out there. And if it helps people to improve, which it is doing, then that's my job done. I just want to share my knowledge that's helped me achieve what I have done. I've got so much information, and I know I can make a difference to people, and that's proved by the seminars and the training camps that I run. The results in just a few sessions where people have been struggling with certain technical things. I just give a couple of simple cues, and more often than not, it corrects the problems. And the number of messages I have saying thank you so much, the number of messages I have on social media saying thank you so much, far outweighs any negative. And all I want to do is help people. And if people don't like that, then don't follow me. Simple. And you've always got me on the TV control if you don't want to listen to me. So.
Yeah, I love that quote that you felt like you were almost professional before the sport was.
Oh, that's the quote of the show.
I might have to put that as the title of the show. That's absolutely incredible. So we've just hit the hour mark, but there is one other topic I'd like to get into very quickly, which is just competition coaching. Because I know that throughout your long career, you had, I don't know if this happened once or more than once, but there are a few times where things maybe weren't handled quite right in the back room. And it seems like perhaps, Josh and I probably overlook this as a topic on the podcast, but I think even in general, coaches, especially at a lower level and maybe even terrifying at a high level, overlook the role that they really should take in the competition back room. So can you talk about what sort of happened and how that's been?
Okay, so I'll give you a couple of examples where there's been a complete shambles. But firstly, I think weightlifters spend hours upon hours, days upon days, weeks, months, years to be the best athlete they can be. When you go to a competition and everything's screwed up because the coach hasn't done their job, that's tough to take. So for any coaches listening, I guess I would just encourage you to reflect on your ability as a coach. And yeah, you may have been in the sport for a long time, but how much time does a coach spend practicing? How much time does a coach spend looking at scoreboards? Is it just when they come to competition, or do they do anything in their own time? Now, if a lifter is expected to train and put all the hours in, then surely a coach should have to do something similar. Two examples. European champs 2003. Steve Cannon was in charge of the governing body. What the hell was he doing in a warm-up room? I don't know. My best clean and jerk at the time was 112.5 kilos. I was in a position where I wanted to take 107.5 kilos in warm-up and then decide whether I went out on the 107 or went up to 110. I took 102 in the warm-up, and I was just about to take the 107, and Steve shouted across the warm-up room, "You're on." I said, "What do you mean I'm on? I haven't even told you what weight I want yet." He said, "You're on." Well, I had no time to argue. And I just said to him, I said, "What weight's on the bar?" 112. Well, what an absolute dick. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Yeah. What more can you say? How does that even happen? How is that even possible? So I had to then convince myself, 102 to 112, it's only 10 kilos and I'm only starting on my best, but hey, let's get on with it. And I did. I got on with the job and pulled it off. But that is just such irresponsible and purely poor coaching. Example number 2, out of retirement, Commonwealth Games, Glasgow. Simon Roach, one simple job, watch the scoreboard. 3 mistakes he made in the warm-up room. One was inability to read a scoreboard at the start. I'd read the board. I checked how many lifts there were before I went out, which I always do because I don't trust coaches in the warm-up room. He agreed. I then planned my warm-up accordingly. And all I wanted him to tell me was, just keep giving me a number. How many lifts before I'm on? I would do the rest of it. I think we had about 14 lifts. And I thought, right, I'll start warming up in a sec in terms of progressing the weight. Literally a minute later, he comes running back to me and he says, there's 7 lifts on. 7 lifts before you. And I thought, oh shit, right, quick. So I literally did 35, 45, 55, 65 snatch. Bish, bash, bosh, done in about a minute. So I just caught my warm-up up, sat down, caught my breath. I've then gone back to check the scoreboard. There's still 14 lifts.
Wow.
I'm like, seriously? And other than telling him, I just, what can you say?
Yeah.
We'd already discussed I was going to go up, increase my starter, I think, to 91, something like that. We posted 90, and he almost forgot. I think he had 2 seconds on the clock to change my starting weight before the clock ran 30 seconds. Balls up number 3, first attempt 108 on the platform. I wanted then to go to 112 or 113, came off the platform. And he fails to nominate the weight before the 30-second clock runs. I have to go out on 101.
That's the worst.
Simon Roach, if you're listening, don't go backstage. Right? Don't do it. Don't do it.
I mean, that's the most devastating thing.
And it cost me a chance of progressing in the competition. But look, there are coaches out there that do put the time in. There are coaches out there that are very good, that can stay focused for the duration of the competition. But there are some coaches that just shouldn't be there. And hey, we as athletes have to reflect. I think coaches should as well.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, I think that's a profound and strong way to wrap this up. Michaela, this has been fantastic. We've had such a good time hearing all of these, these incredible stories, motivational stories, your thoughts on technique and all of that. And quite honestly, I think we should, at some point, if you're up for it, almost look to do another one where we can actually talk about, the clean and the jerk and how to get strong. There are so many topics that we didn't even touch upon.
Sure. Well, loads of it is covered. Loads of it's covered in the book, and there's a direct link to pre-orders, which is on my Instagram account, awesome. And it's on social media. So yeah, I'm happy to take any questions. Fire them at me on social media as well.
Fantastic. So where can people go? So if they want to purchase a book or follow you, where are the kind of outlets that people can head to? Because we'll post the links below.
On Instagram, it's at Michaela Breeze. I think on my bio, there's a link to purchase the book directly from there at the moment. Or my Facebook page, Michaela Breeze, Olympic weightlifting coach. A lot of the info is repeated, so you only need to follow one of them. But that's where you get most of the bits, and I put loads of coaching clips out there. And as I said, all I want to do is help people to progress, to develop, and to be better lifters themselves.
Awesome. Well, absolutely. That is fantastic. And guys, grab the book on pre-order. Links are all down below. Pick up a copy. Recommend it to a friend, and of course, follow Michaela in all of these other places. Of course, also follow Josh on Instagram at Josh_PhilWL. That's PHALWL. And on Facebook at Joshua Gibson. You can follow me at Seb Ostrovich, that's with the WICZ, or at Weightlifting House everywhere else. We appreciate you tuning in, and we shall catch you all on another episode of the Weightlifting House podcast.